All right. I think it's working. It's thinking. So I'm going to do a quick little intro here, and then I'll pass it over to Alex. All right. Thank you all for joining us for Merge PHP August 2022. I can't believe it's August already. Very excited about Alex's talk. He is going to be talking about JavaScript development in the modern monolith and using modern JavaScript in the full stack frameworks like Laravel and Symfony that we know and love. And yeah, I'm super interested in this talk, so thank you so much, Alex, for speaking this month. And yeah, that quick, nice and short. So take it away.
All right, great. Well, hello everybody. My name is Alex Six, like Logan said. Let me share my screen really quick. Got to get all of our faces out of the way. Let's see. Yep. Sorry, I'm gonna boot you off, Logan. There we go. All right, so we're going to be talking about JavaScript in the modern monolith. Obviously, like I said, my name's Alex Six. I'm a senior developer and a project lead at Kirschbaum. We are a Laravel shop, a Laravel partner, and we do kind of everything. We do greenfield applications. We do team augmentation, where we'll come in and join your development team and blend right in, do some development work. We also do rescue projects, which is typically where I specialize, where we take older projects or projects that are just in need of updating, either from old versions of Laravel to new versions of Laravel, or if they're moving from a separate framework to Laravel. And we take it, we build them up, and we send them out to go be awesome as the applications were meant to be. I'm also a Twitch streamer. I stream live every Monday and Thursday. We're actually going live. I'm going live right after this, so come on over if you want to hang out. And we do all sorts of things over there. We do PHP development, mostly with Laravel. We do a lot of JavaScript development. Right now, we're doing some work with React and Next.js, just because it felt like it was about time I learned React. I dodged it. I typically do Vue.js or Svelte. And I'm also a mentorship advocate. So I could talk for a long, long time on that, but I won't, but I could. And to make a very long story short, I was not intending on going into tech or programming at all. But I had a mentor who saw a lot in me and saw that I would be a good programmer and kind of dragged me by the collar into it. And honestly, I have him to thank more than just about anything else for being where I am today. But that's a little bit about me. I've probably rambled on for way too long already. So I want to pose a question, a rhetorical question. And it is, what do you think of when you think about PHP? I have three things, but I'm going to give you just a second. Think about that in your mind. When you think about PHP, what do you think about? I'm going to take a sip of water, and then we'll see what I said. So like I said, for me, I think of three things. The first is dollar signs. We have dollar signs all over the place, right? PHP can make you rich. It can also make you see dollar signs all over your code. That's the one thing that people say all the time on Twitch. They'll pop onto my stream and not know I'm doing Laravel and like, why are all these dollar signs here? So that is ingrained into my brain. The next thing I think about is fast, simple development. For as long as I've been writing PHP, it has been my go-to language to get things up and running quickly and easily, whether it's a production deployment, spinning up a server that can run PHP is really simple, or even just local development and development of side projects and enterprise applications. I love the simplicity that comes with PHP, but I also love the little dopamine hits of just getting things up and running really quickly. And I also think about majestic monoliths that I love to build, and I would assume a lot of us love to build as well. We were talking before the meetup started about how y'all had talked about Laravel versus Symfony a couple months back or a month back. And for me, those are just the most beautiful monolithic frameworks you can use. And we'll obviously talk more about that tonight. So second question, what do we not think of when we think about PHP? I have two things here. Again, I'll give you a second to think about it, but what do you not think about when you think about PHP? Or I guess, what are things that don't apply to PHP in your mind? For me, like I said, I have two things. The first one is asynchronous client-side updates. So with the applications that we build at Kirschbaum, a lot of times we're doing asynchronous client-side updates. Now, Obviously, there are ways to do this with sprinkles of JavaScript, even WebAssembly. If you want to compile PHP down, that's a whole different talk altogether. But for me, when I think about a generic run-of-the-mill PHP application, this is not something that comes to mind for me. The other thing is fun, lively animations. When I think of just a run-of-the-mill standard WordPress, Laravel, Cake, PHP application, I'm not usually thinking of fun, lively animations and things sliding and spinning and fading. And, we have CSS transitions and CSS animations that we can use, but at some point, there's a limit. Now, not everything needs either of these things. Not every application needs either of these things. But for me, they're things that I don't really think about. So at Kirschbaum, we began to ask ourselves, how do we add these sorts of things to our PHP applications? Because we love Laravel. That's why we do what we do. We work at Kirschbaum. We build our projects the way we do because we love Laravel and we love PHP. But how do we get these things that we typically don't associate with PHP apps into our PHP apps? And for us, there were a couple of ways, but JavaScript is typically the answer for us. And I want to run through two and a half ways that we do that. I'll stop and say right now, this whole talk is a very surface level, let's just discover what's out there kind of talk. I do encourage you, if any of these things seem interesting, dive in. They're not as hard as they look, especially if you've never done JavaScript before, you don't do a lot of JavaScript. The JavaScript language might seem a little intimidating because it can be a little weird. There are some weird edge cases with JavaScript, but these ways to add these sorts of JavaScript interactivity to our websites and our web applications are phenomenal and also very simple to use. So the first way that we typically add these sorts of interactions and animations to our website are what I would like to call JavaScript sprinkles, right? So they're just perfect for these little tiny bits of interactivity for your website or your web app. I've got 3 examples here. 2 of them should at least look very familiar. Vanilla JavaScript is what I honestly have defaulted to for a while because in the last couple of years, especially, vanilla JavaScript has gotten updates and gotten more added to its underlying API to make it really powerful and really easy to use, even without a library or a framework on top, which is awesome, right? We're shipping less JavaScript over the wire. We're getting a faster load time and a better experience for our users. The other one is jQuery. I know a lot of people seem to have a vendetta against jQuery because it's old, it's outdated, it's big, it's bloated. However, I'm pretty firmly in the camp of, I don't care what you use. If you're making a great end product for your users, you could be writing in binary for all I care. All I care about is you being productive and building great things. And jQuery can help you do that. I've built a lot of great applications. I mean, I think they're great with jQuery. But my choice right now, which some people might have heard of, some people might not have, is Alpine.js. It's a very, very small JavaScript library that gives you just about everything you could want to do for little sprinkles of JavaScript. So think drop-down menus, the little slide over menu you get when you click on the weird hamburger icon on a mobile app, right? Those levels of interactivity, even all the way up to storing some things, storing state, but we'll get to that. So this is an example of an Alpine.js component. There's not a lot of code here, and that's on purpose. So Alpine.js was originally built to be delivered by a CDN, which is why I've actually just used the unpackaged CDN link up there in the script tag at the very top of the page. It's easy. You can obviously import it with your node modules. You can, do the whole thing where you npm install Alpine and you get 500 dependencies out of it and you bundle that and push it to wherever. But if you're just trying it out, the CDN works great. Other than that, you'll see we have a div tag or a pair of div tags, a button in the span. And we're going to walk through this really quick. And it's likely that it's likely that you know what's going on here. But just to walk through, the div tag is the Alpine component. This whole thing constitutes an entire functional reactive Alpine component. So xdata, the attribute on the div, is what defines the component. So whatever HTML tag the xdata attribute is on, that defines the component boundaries. And you'll notice inside of the quotes, there's a JavaScript object where open is being set to false. That'll become important later. You are probably starting to see what this is probably going to do. Underneath that, within the div, we have a button and we have a span. We're going to go for the span first, and we'll come back to the button. So the span has an xShow attribute with the word open inside of the quotes. All the xShow attribute does in Alpine is when the JavaScript expression inside of the quotes evaluates to something truthy, it shows the element. It display blocks or display flexes or whatever is the element. When xShow evaluates as something false or falsy, it hides the element. It doesn't remove it from the DOM. It's still there. You can still click into your inspector to see it, but it removes it from the actual browser, from the user's site. Now the button. So we have this @click attribute. @click can also be x on : click, but this is just a shorthand. And then inside there, you see open equals true. All this is saying is Alpine is intercepting that click event and saying, hey, when this button is clicked, do the thing inside of the quotes. So when you put it all together, by default, open is false when this component loads. When the user opens up this component on the browser, by default, the open is false. Since open is false, xShow evaluates to false, so content is not shown. But then when we click on the button, open changes to true, which then shows the content in the span. Talking through code, not super ideal. Let's try it out really quickly, and hopefully that will help a little bit here. So if we pop this open, and I'm just going to slide this over a little bit, just to make this a little easier to see, let me give ourselves some space. Everything around here is just, ooh, this is really sensitive now. Everything around here is just chroming for your typical HTML document. So on the left, you'll see we have basically the same code snippet, except I've changed one thing. Instead of being open, I've changed the button to toggle just because it's much easier to demonstrate because I don't have to refresh the page every time. Again, we have open equals false. So by default, this component is not shown because we have an xShow for open here. You'll notice this paragraph is not showing. However, when I click the button, open changes to true and the paragraph shows. And we can continue to toggle it back and forth and back and forth. Seems really simple, seems really easy, and you'd be right. That's why I love Alpine. There's a whole lot of power inside of this really teeny tiny JavaScript library that lets you do pretty much every JavaScript sprinkle of reactivity you could possibly want on a site. And actually, while we're here, we're going to pull a little bit of an audible Alpine.js. Let's take a look at the website. You'll recognize this code example. I was not going to make that up myself. This page is every attribute you have to know in Alpine. There's 15 of them to know the entire library. It's really small. It's really powerful. They have properties and methods, one of which I love, which is Alpine Store. You can store data locally and keep it in state. So you could have Alpine components outside of other Alpine components that are reacting to changes in data. But just to get the reactivity, the parts that I normally use, I rarely go outside of these 15 attributes. And we've seen some of them already. We've seen xData already, declares the component. We've seen xOn, it actually was the @ sign, but it just tells the browser to listen for an event. We've seen xShow, it just toggles the visibility, but you can do things like just setting the text or setting HTML. You can do things like synchronizing a piece of data with an input. So you could have an input that feeds a filter, and you can dynamically filter with Alpine just with this xModel attribute. Lots of things we can do. They have transitions built in. So if you really like, smooth fade, kind of like the fade and grow transitions, the things you see on nice polished websites and web applications, Alpine has it built in. X4, you can repeat things. Xif, it's like xShow, but it'll actually remove it from the DOM and put it back, which is great. Lots of things you can do here. Lots of very, very powerful things, all the way up to things like Xeffect, which acts like a use effect hook from React, if you're familiar. It's really cool. It's really great. There we go. Let's see. Sorry, I realized I didn't have the chat open. Also, I said I do stream. So if you do have chat, just go ahead. You can put it over there and I will keep an eye on it as we're going. But Alpine is probably one of my favorite frameworks to use. It's actually such a popular framework in the Laravel ecosystem. There's an entire stack called the Tall stack that uses Alpine and sort of a sibling library called Livewire. They're both made by the same person. It's really powerful. It's simple. Well, it's powerful as hell, they might say. And it's lightweight. My favorite part, it's lightweight. Again, the less JavaScript we're pushing over the wire, the better of an experience a user is going to have in general. So that's Alpine. Again, to reiterate, really, really easy to learn, incredibly powerful, 15 attributes. We already went over this. But what if that's not enough? What if you're looking at that and you're like, okay, that's fine. That's good, but I want more, right? You want an entire framework. You want the client side application to be self-sustaining and you want to be able to use all the cool libraries that come built in or as packages of these big frameworks. Framer motion is a big one that I've been into lately to do animations in React. But in order to use that library, I have to be using React. I can't use Alpine. I can't even use Vue or Svelte. I have to use React for that one. Obviously, there's alternatives, but you get the point. Sometimes there's just certain qualifications that an application has to push you a little further. So if Alpine isn't enough, if JavaScript sprinkles are not enough, what do we do? So for a long time, single page applications were the answer. And for whatever reason, for, I don't know, probably a good 3, 4, 5 years, like that was the way you built web applications if you were cool and hip and, with it or whatever. And they're really good. Like single page applications have their purpose. But the thing about single page applications is that if you don't build them really well, they're really bad. Like for the user, they can be really bad. You could get into endless spinners where you have a spinner to load the page and then the sidebar loads, and you have a spinner to load the content, then you load all the content, then you have individual components that spin. And it's just a mess. It just becomes an unusable mess. However, they're really flexible. They're really nice when you have a specific front end team, a specific back end team, because you can split the repositories up. And you could say, you know what, front end team, you work on this one, back end team, you work on this one. We can stay independent. We can talk, we can communicate. We don't have to touch each other's stuff. The problem I see with single page apps is that I am a big believer, and we at Kirschbaum are big believers too, that going right to this is typically not the right answer for a product online, especially if it's a web application, right? Web applications should be validated and verified by the people that you're intending to sell them to or have use or whatever, right? So getting something to market, the idea of an MVP is really, really important. And typically SPAs with an API as a backend are not going to be your MVP. Typically it's going to be a monolithic application, which is fine. But then you get some growing pains. So there's some drawbacks, right? So moving from a monolith to an SPA. And one of them is having to rebuild your monolith as a REST or GraphQL API. REST and GraphQL APIs are fantastic. I love them. I've built a ton of them. However, once you've already built this monolithic web app, it could potentially be a pain to have to move it over to an API, to transfer all of the logic you've already written into an API. If it's written well, or you have a very specific type of app, a CRUD app is kind of what comes to mind, then this might not be that bad. But for some applications, it can be a bit of a pain. Another pain point that I know I feel a lot is having to move the state management and the routing logic of your application to the client side. If I've spent all this time working on my state management, working my routing logic, it sucks to have to move that over to a front-end application and have React router or Vue router or Svelte, whatever Svelte's router is called at this point. It sucks to have to move all that information over from the back end to the front end. Again, possible, but not ideal. And I think the biggest thing that hurts companies that try to move from monoliths to SPAs are that you really can incur more development and deployment complexity. Building and deploying a monolith is easy. I mean, you can make it complex. You can do things to make that process harder, but at its core, monoliths are pretty simple. You have one application, one repository you have to deal with. Everybody's using the same repository. You don't have to worry about having 2 separate servers running on your computer at the same time, one for your React app and one for your Laravel API or your WordPress content management system or whatever it is. This can be a big hiccup for companies, especially as they're first learning to move to SPAs. Honestly, this is what can cause a SPA that's made really, really well to fall below the threshold of usability, is how you deploy it. But there is a better way. There is a better way. You can get the client-side experience of an SPA with smooth transitions, no full page refreshes, all the animation and transitions and fancy schmancy libraries you could ever want to use, along with the nice server-side experience of developing a monolith with your sessions and your routing and ease of authentication and authorization and permissions and all those sorts of things. That way it's called Inertia.js. They brand themselves as the modern monolith, so I definitely just yoinked this talk title from them. But Inertia is really cool. It's not a framework. It's more like glue, because what happens is Inertia is a little package that sits in between the backend logic of your monolithic application and whatever front end JavaScript framework you decide to use. React, Vue, and Svelte are the three that they support right now. And what happens is that inertia intercepts all of the requests and responses going back and forth and enables you to build your monolithic application like you normally would, but smack an SPA onto the front of it. So in Laravel, our templating engine is called Blade. Basically what inertia does is it saws off Blade and puts Vue or React or Svelte on the front instead. It's really cool. So like I said, it works with React, Vue, and Svelte. But why we're all here is what PHP frameworks does it work with. So out of the box, it works with Laravel. So we have something for our artisans. We have something for our dessert lovers. We have something for our pyromaniacs. We have something for our audiophiles. We have something for our Gutenberg lovers. We have something for the people who say yes too much. They have something for everybody. Now, Cake, CodeIgniter, Symfony, WordPress, and Yi are all community maintained plugins, but they're really good and they're really stable. So what I want to do now is I want to see what this looks like in practice. And I'm going to show off 3 of my favorite things about inertia. And we'll just go through those really quick. I initially was going to jump back to the slides, but that was way too much transition time. So sessions and routing, simple front-end form requests, and persisting components. So let's take a look. So I'm going to minimize this. We're going to pull this back over a little bit. And let's open up Corgi cards. So I have a Corgi. Her name is Leia. She is the best pet that anyone could ever want. I love her. She's fantastic. This is the application that I've made in her honor. I was watching a stream of somebody programming, and their thing is to open packs of Pokemon cards and trade them with other streamers. I was like, oh, that's really cool. That's what I'm going to build for this talk. So the idea is you have Corgi cards, right? They have statistics and all that. And what you can do is you can view your card just like you would be able to in a normal application, has your stats and all that, and you can sell it. You can offer it up on the auction house. Now, I imagine this is going to be, okay, there's still one here. Fantastic. So the auction house is where you can see your cards and place bids, right? Amount you can buy now, place, all sort of stuff. Very simple, very easy. Let's take a look really quickly over here in my editor. This is what the Blade file would look like for the dashboard. So what we're looking at right now, this is what the Blade file would look like. I'm not going to spend a ton of time on this. All this code, if it's not a public repository, it will be. And I'll send it, Logan, probably to you, and we can get it disseminated as people want it. But it'll be open so anybody can come and look at all this code. But just to keep it really simple, we have cards being passed in, and for each card, we're just rendering out the card. So what you see on the screen. So the name, the image, the description, which is just Lorem Ipsum text, and all the statistics. And you notice down here on this anchor tag, and I'll zoom in just a little bit, make it a little bigger, we have a route that goes to our card show route, which is what we saw here when we click on this button. It'll show us all the details about the card. It works like your typical CRUD app, right? There's nothing special. There's nothing crazy here. However, what we can do, let me get back into my editor. If we check out main and we pop over here, and I'm just going to really quickly restart Vite and make sure all of our assets are going to load correctly. Fantastic. We'll give it a second. Now that I've checked out main, this branch is entirely running on inertia. So we'll let this spin and think and do its thing for a minute. There we go. You'll notice it looks identical. And that's because I basically just copied all the styles over into what are now React components. So we saw the Blade file just a second ago. I'll bring it back up and I'll split the screen. I need to move all our faces out of the way so I can see. I'll split the screen on this side. We will go to the dashboard.jsx file. Make this a little bigger. There we go. So on the left, like I said, we have our Blade file. This is what typically ships with the Laravel app. On the right-hand side, we have a React component. If you're not familiar with React, that is entirely okay. Because what I want to showcase is that if we pull these up so they're side by side with each other, you'll notice if you look back and forth, they're pretty similar. There's not a whole lot different here. The only thing that's different is in React to do for each loops, you use a map, which drives me insane, but that's just the Vue.js developer and me talking, I guess, as opposed to a for each on this side. But everything else is the same. We have the card name, card cover image. Obviously, it's a little taller because React is a little more vertical than Blade is, but everything is still here. All the statistics are here. All the classes are the same. Font semi-bold, right? All the same sort of stuff. So it's really cool. When you're moving to something like inertia, when you decide, you know what, I needed something a little more than just my typical server rendered monolith, it's really easy to make the lift from blade to inertia, or from whatever your templating engine of choice is to inertia. I love that. The second thing is sessions and routing. So if I pop up my directory here and we go to routes and I go to web blade, and let's just make this the entire screen. Yeah, there we go. So this is what routing looks like in Laravel if you're not super familiar. Very simple. We can do get routes, we can do post routes, we give it the URL and the controller action that that route is pointing at. So for example, for the dashboard, we are going to card controller index. So this is the method that's actually running to give us all the cards. So we're getting all the available cards, which is just a query that doesn't really matter. It's just giving us all the cards that we own. And it's returning what's called an inertia view. So what that means is when this response goes out of the server, inertia, the middleware, hijacks it really quick. And instead of sending back the actual view, V-I-E-W, it sends back a React or a Vue or a Svelte component that's dehydrated and gets hydrated by the inertia package on the front end. So all that said, this is what our web blade routing looks like. So this is back when it was blade. This is what it looked like. If I go to web.php, this is what it looks like now. So let me split this really quick. On the bottom is the blade routing. That wasn't meant to do. On the bottom is the blade routing. On the top is the inertia routing. If you're squinting and trying to figure out, Alex, you're an idiot, those are identical, you're right. They are. This is one of the best things about inertia for me. I didn't have to change my routes at all. The only one that I kind of had to change was this one up here because it was the default Laravel route that instead of returning a view, now we're returning an inertia view, right? But for how I would typically write routes in a normal professional application where I'm using controllers and the MVC pattern and all the stuff we know and love, they haven't changed. They're identical. Because with inertia, you get to use all of the wonderful niceties of these monolithic frameworks. It's fantastic. I love it. I'm a big fan, in case you couldn't tell. The other thing that I really love about inertia is form requests. So we all can't really deny that you'd be hard pressed to beat the simplicity and the nice developer experience of just making a form tag, putting an action on it, and then putting a method on it and saying, hey, all the stuff in here, when I click this submit button, just send it to the server. If we go to something like create.blade, there we go. This is when you can create an auction for the card. If we come down here, we see our form class, right? I love this. The ergonomics of this are so nice because I know just by looking at this form tag, what the method's going to be and what the action's going to be. I know that Laravel is going to post to my auction.store route, which is going to enable me to store a new auction. Really, really simple. If we go to the create.jsx, which is the React component that corresponds, it's a little more complicated, I will admit. We do have this use form hook. Bear that in mind. And again, there's one of those for React, Vue, or Svelte, so pick your favorite. If we come down here, though, into the DOM, you'll notice we still have a form, but instead of having a method and an action, we just have an onSubmit hook. So on submit, when the submit button is clicked, because again, we're using your typical bog standard HTML form, on submit, we're going to run this submit event, or excuse me, this submit handler. It's going to prevent the default event because we don't want a full page reload in an SPA. The point is to keep everything on the server as much as, or on the client as much as possible. But it's going to post to route auction.store. So as a reminder, if we look over here, in this form, we see the method is post and the route is auction.store. If we hop back to the React, you'll notice that inertia has given us this beautiful post function to use and this beautiful route function to use, which enables me to lift my method and my action from my control or from my form up into the where you would handle all your stuff in React. Same thing would apply for Vue. You'd put it down in the methods object, and Svelte would be the same thing. You put it up in the script tags at the top of the file. A little more complicated, but not bad. And all of that is possible because of this use form hook. This is also something inertia provides. And it basically says, hey, pass in a JavaScript object that represents the stuff that you're expecting to go to the server. And as long as you submit that stuff, inertia is going to handle it. It's going to go back to the controller, which we can take a look at. Auction controller. Let me go to store. all of these requests, request input card ID, seller ID, current bid, buyout price, ends at. Card ID, seller ID, current bid, buyout price, ends at. They all get sent over in the exact same way that you would anticipate it being in your normal server rendered monolithic application. It's really cool. It's really easy. You do have to do a little bit of legwork here, I will admit, but Inertia makes it way more simple than having to work with JavaScript web tokens or having to work with OAuth authentication to make sure you're secure and sending the form requests back and forth. Inertia handles that. We don't have to worry about it. The other thing that I love about Inertia, and this is something I love because it's not something that is easily possible in most server rendered PHP apps. If we take a look, it may be a little small, so I'll increase a little bit. You'll see this little floating window down here in the bottom, this little floating box. So if you were looking closely, which I don't blame you if you weren't, it's a little tiny white box at the corner of the screen. On the Blade version, we had an actual countdown until the auction ended, but it was static. The only way to update the number of days, hours, minutes, and seconds until the auction ended was to refresh the page. On this side, for ease of demonstration, I've flipped it and said, here's how many seconds your current auction, your auction in progress, has been going. So you notice it's at 32, 33, 34. If I come here and I refresh the page, it goes back to 0. That's to be expected, right? The default state is 0, and we refresh the page. We got a brand new instance of the front end from the server, and now it's gonna start counting up again. However, what I've done on the Inertia version is I have made this piece of the interface persistent. It's in a persistent layout, so it will exist in between page transitions. So 26, 27, if I go up here to Auction House and I click, you'll notice the timer's not reset. It just keeps on ticking, keeps on going. Obviously, a timer is a little bit of a basic example of this, but you can think podcast players, audio players, video players. Think about YouTube. I've noticed they're doing this at least sometimes. I honestly can't get the trigger regularly, but I'm not that much of a YouTube watcher, so maybe that's why. But when you're watching a YouTube video and you go back to the homepage, back to your little YouTube dashboard or whatever, the video player pops down into the bottom corner of the page and continues playing, or will pause or do whatever, but it persists there. It doesn't lose your place in the video. It doesn't lose what you were doing. It persists that state. That's something that's really easy and really powerful about a single page application, about these JavaScript frameworks. You can do things like that. And so no matter how many times I bounce back and forth and load between these two pages, that timer doesn't change because we're not doing the full page refresh. I know it's probably really hard to see the little spinner, little refresh thing up here, but normally when I would do a full page refresh, a full page reload, it would turn to an X. You'll notice that's not happening here. And what I can do to prove that is I can come into here and let's go to network and let's go to throttling. We're going to put it on slow 3G and let's get it off of responsive for just a minute so I can get these links back. Watch really closely along the top of the screen, right underneath my URL bar. When I click, you see this little loader going there. So that's also baked in by Inertia because there's a big problem in SPAs is clicking and then there's no feedback, so nothing happens. So by default, Inertia says, hey, here, have a loading bar so people, you know when your request is being run. So every time we go back and forth, that loader appears. But, and again, I know it's hard to see, so take my word on it and then go download the repo and try it yourself. When I change between these two pages, my refresh icon is not changing because we're not reloading the page. All we're doing is reloading everything inside of that persistent layout. Again, you'll notice the seconds elapsed have continued to go up. We're at 150 now. They haven't changed. But if I refresh, and again, if you can, watch the refresh icon. If I actually do a page refresh, you'll see there's a little X, there's a little loading spinner. We're on a slow 3G, so it's going to take a minute. But you see the page just turns white. It goes away until we can get that response back, which now I'm regretting keeping it on slow 3G. But Inertia lets us handle that on the front end a little more gracefully and keep the persistent components, which is honestly the best thing for me. So I love those things about Inertia. I think they're fantastic. I think Inertia is a fantastic way to add extra functionality that you wouldn't normally get in your typical monolith. It really does. And I know it's such a cheap thing to say because it's literally their branding, but it really does modernize the feeling of monoliths because there's a lot of monolith haters out there. There really are. But I have a few takeaways and I want to go ahead and wrap this up so we can chat and do questions and do all that. But I want to be very, very clear. I am in no way saying that building monolithic PHP applications is not a viable option for the web. I think building PHP monoliths is a viable option for a wide array of applications on the web. I wouldn't do it if I didn't believe that, right? Laravel is a server rendered monolithic web framework at its core. Obviously, it can do other things. I think building just normal, very minimal JavaScript PHP apps is super viable. I also think that if you're going to be adding little sprinkles of JavaScript here and there, Alpine.js is an amazing way to get that functionality at a low bundle size, so you're not sending a lot of bytes over the wire, but also really quickly and really easily. If you don't know Alpine, it will take you maybe a few hours to come up to speed, tops. It's a really simple library that could do a lot. I mean, it could do a lot. One of my favorite admin panels for Laravel, Filament, is built using Livewire and Alpine because Alpine is so powerful. And the other thing, the more obvious takeaway, is that instead of converting your monolith to an SPA and an API, maybe consider using Inertia instead. Inertia is not a one-size-fits-all solution. Nothing is, right? This is programming. These are web applications. There's never a one-size-fits-all answer. However, I encourage you to put it in your consideration list, because I think there are a lot more applications than we realize where we can use this modern monolith to level up the front end and make a really incredible experience for our users, but maintain our sanity and ability to build our monolith without having to rebuild it again from the ground up as an API. It's really nice. You can use your preferred front-end framework, even if you have a distributed front-end team or a distinct front-end team, whatever framework they love to use. If they're Svelte developers, they can use Svelte. If they're React developers, they could use React. I'm sure there's an Angular package out there somewhere. They just don't mention it on their website. But it allows your front end to be its own beautiful SPA while you can stay in the monolith and you can build web applications just like you know how already. No extra things to learn. Maybe a few extra things to learn, but only a handful. So that's it. This was an exploratory talk. I want to plant the seeds of intrigue in brains, and I encourage you to go out and take a look. See what's out there as far as Alpine and Inertia go, and see if you could add those into the tool belt. If you're still using jQuery or if you're using vanilla JavaScript, give Alpine a go. If you're constantly splitting up monoliths into single page apps, or if you're just building SPAs and APIs by default, give Inertia a shot. See where you can go with it. Here's all my contact info. Go there if you'd like. The repository link is down there on the bottom. I was smart enough in advance to put it there. It may not be public yet, so I will check after the talk and make sure that it is public, but pull the repository down and give it a shot. The main branch is the Inertia branch, and there's a branch called vanilla-laravel, which has just the Blade implementation we started with today. Also, like I said, I stream live on Twitch every Monday and Thursday, so come hang out after Merge PHP is over. I'll be live on Twitch. We'll be doing some stuff with JavaScript, so you get to see me fumble around with React for a couple hours. And last but certainly not least, big thanks to Kirschbaum for helping me out with figuring all the talk stuff out in the slides and finding all the corgi gifs. But at the same time, if you're a Laravel developer, if you're a seasoned Laravel developer and you're excited about the framework and you love working with clients, we're hiring. Kirschbaumdevelopment.com/careers. We're hiring lead and just normal Laravel programmers. And if you have any friends who are programming in Node or Go and you're interested in working at Kirschbaum, we're also hiring for that too. So thank you guys. That's all I've got. So I appreciate y'all letting me come on out and give a talk.
Thanks, Alex. That was great.
Yeah,
that was a good overview of all the JavaScript things.
Yeah, there's a lot of them. There's a lot of JavaScript things, and more literally every day.
Yeah. So I mean, let's give everyone here a few minutes to get their questions in. So if you have any questions for Alex, definitely drop them in chat. I think the permissions should be fixed there. And then we'll check the YouTube as well. I was a little late on getting the YouTube link shared everywhere, but we might get some questions filtering in there. My one Logan question is, and somebody actually mentioned it in the chat as well. I think it'd be maybe nice to touch on it in a bit. Is can you talk about like how Jetstream works and like the different options that Laravel Jetstream gives you?
Yeah, definitely. So it's actually funny. I considered using Jetstream to install Inertia in Laravel, and I actually ended up using Laravel Breeze, which is one of the authentication frameworks for Laravel. Just because I was like, you know what, we're already stacking a lot here, so let's just keep it minimal. But Jetstream is great. I really enjoy using Jetstream. So what Jetstream is, for anybody who might not know, is it's a built-in, well, it's an available package for Laravel from the Laravel team that lets you quickly and easily scaffold out and build back-end dashboards, right? So any sort of admin panel functionality, things like that. It comes in 2 stacks. And funny enough, both stacks use the technologies we talked about today. So there's the tall stack implementation that uses Tailwind, Alpine, Livewire, and Laravel. That's my personal favorite, if I'm being honest, just because of how it's implemented. And then there is the Inertia stack that I think at this point you can choose between React and Vue. For a while, it was just Vue.js on Inertia, but I believe you can choose React at this point. I know you can, at least for Breeze. But yeah, Jetstream is fantastic. If you're looking to just dip your toes in with Inertia and you are a Laravel developer, even if you're not, I mean, Laravel's pretty simple to pick up if you do PHP already. Go for Breeze or Jetstream. Either of those will, not only will they set everything up, they'll do all of the, create Inertia app in your app.js and pull in all the right repositories and packages and things, but it actually gives you a couple components to start with. Like the chroming of this application. So the header, the links, the title for each page, that was already baked in from Laravel Breeze. So it's a breeze to get started on all of that.
They do try to make it as easy as possible, keep the programmer happy, and productive. That's the goal. Thank you so much for answering my question. I see Ray in the chat has it. I'll just go ahead and repeat it, and then you can reply. What is the use case for Alpine versus Livewire?
Okay, so Alpine and Livewire actually don't compete. They actually fulfill 2 different use cases. And actually, not only do they not compete, they are almost meant to go together. So Alpine is purely JavaScript. So it's for things on the client side. So think drop-down menus, slide overs, like nice little fade-ins when you click a button. That's really what Alpine is used for. It's used for all sorts of things on the front end, the client side that's delivered to a user's browser. Livewire is more of an Ajax replacement. So what Livewire does is it allows you to write front-end components, and I'll tell you why I put those in air quotes in a minute. It allows you to write front-end components in PHP with PHP classes. Even better, in Laravel, our Blade components can be backed by PHP classes, and the API for Livewire components and Blade components pretty much lines up. There are obviously a few different things with Livewire because it does a little more. But what Livewire allows you to do is, without having to fire off Ajax requests or API requests, you can send data back from the server and sync data back down to the client again. The reason why Alpine came out in the first place was because people were complaining, like, I really don't want to run a whole server request just to click this drop down and like have it appear, right? You need JavaScript. Livewire came out of the idea from Caleb Porzio that we don't need JavaScript. JavaScript is not relevant for web applications. You don't need it. He kind of quickly turned and pivoted a little bit and said, okay, you need it a little bit because we don't want to be running a network request every time someone opens the mobile nav bar, right? So honestly, if you're going to use one, I guess really if you're going to use Livewire, you're going to want to use Alpine, because just like we want to push as few bits over the wire as possible for user experience sake, we also don't want people to be waiting for a round trip from the client to the server and back to like open a drop down or to click a button.
Hopefully that was answered your question, Randy. Let us know in the chat there, and we can go into some more detail.
Definitely.
Zimzat on YouTube asks, does Inertia JS mean that you have duplicate templates as both server side and client side variations, or that everything has been converted to inertia.js. So can you go over just briefly kind of touch on the React component versus the Blade template?
Yeah, and admittedly, now that you say that, that was probably a little confusing. So, what inertia does is it completely separates like the Blade components from your application. So you are no longer using Blade. You are only writing your front end in Vue, React, or Svelte. So you will have to port over all of your Blade templates or whatever other templating engines people are using to a JavaScript component syntax. So the example has both of them in there, mostly just for comparison's sake, right? I had the dashboard.blade.php file there, as well as the dashboard.tsx file, the React component. But in actuality, you would delete the Blade component. You would not have that in there anymore, and you would just use React on the front end.
So you had a Blade version and then a React component version, just for illustration purposes on like what it would look like in those two different syntaxes. I think that's a good example on kind of like here's probably what it's going to look like before you migrate things over, and then here's kind of a afterwards end state. That makes sense.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, at the end of the day, with inertia applications, you are writing JavaScript for everything the browser sees. You're writing React or Vue or Svelte for every single thing the user will see in their browser. But then everything else from the browser back is your typical PHP framework of choice.
Cool. Hopefully that answered your questions, Imzat. I think it was clear to me. let us know in the YouTube chat there. And if you have any more questions for Alex, I think we'll give it another minute or two, and then stop the recording, and then we'll invite everybody to join us on stage here. Thank you so much for sticking around, and definitely check Alex out on Twitch afterwards. Like 30 minutes, an hour or something, probably.
Yeah, I typically, so I'm in Eastern time zone. Also, shout out Atlanta PHP. I'm in Columbia, South Carolina. So whoop, go team.
Yay.
You're the closest to me, I guess. Yeah, so Eastern time zone. So I usually go till about 11 p.m. I'll probably go a little later tonight since I usually start around 8 p.m. my time, which is 15 minutes ago. Not that I'm in a rush at all to get over there, trust me. Because we're doing a lot of React. We're building a personal website in React now, which is just making my brain kind of melt a little bit, but that's the fun part.
It's good. React's really powerful. You can do a lot with that stuff. Next.js, I've been really loving learning and building stuff in Next. But yeah, I'm definitely a fan of using React components in Laravel, and I did some Vue stuff in the past as well with Laravel. I think that's what a lot of people are used to. And Svelte is super interesting as well. It's like learning about like ES components and kind of like native Java components that Svelte does really is nicely. My one kind of like thing on Alpine is like, it kind of looks like lightweight Angular. Did you use Angular in the past?
Okay. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, so it's funny now that I honestly had never thought that, but now that you say it, I'm like, oh yeah, no, I see it. There's just a whole lot of stuff in your HTML, right? I think if I remember correctly, and again, I'm talking for Caleb here, so maybe take it with a grain of salt. I'm pretty sure he had huge inspiration from Tailwind, because he and Adam Wathan are really close. And so he was like, why can't I write JavaScript in my HTML? Like, what's stopping me? And so he was like, Alpine is going to be primarily based in the HTML, but then it ends up looking a whole lot like Angular, because you've got like X data, X model, X if, and just all these very like Angular-esque things. The nice thing is it's a lot more lightweight, and you have a lot more freedom to do what you want and organize things how you want, where Angular is kind of like, here's how you're going to do it, for better or for worse.
Yeah, Angular is definitely very opinionated, right? And it's clearly that, like, if you can fit Alpine inside of Laravel, that says a lot.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's a reason why I don't know if even like the default, I guess the default Laravel install wouldn't, but pretty much everything Laravel now is Alpine. It has Alpine in there somewhere. The creators love it. Again, obviously the guy who made it is a Laravel developer, so maybe a little biased in some aspects, but it's all over Laravel. So if you're a Laravel dev, you probably already know about Alpine, or at least have heard about it.
Cool. All right.
I've got a quick question before we sign off here. I was just curious about like if the either Breeze or Jetstream, if out of the box it comes with like a testing framework sort of thing. I'm sure, does it come with like a hello world and then you can kind of expand on it, or how does that?
Yeah. So out of the box, so I guess to answer the first part of the question, yes. They all come with tests, and tests obviously, like, can I see the dashboard, which is what both of them come with. They come with a /dashboard route. Can I see the dashboard? True or false? Yes. They come with a lot of tests wrapping all of the authentication logic that they add, which is really, really nice. So not only do you get this authentication scaffolding that's very good, and I've used it for a lot of projects, both at Kirschbaum, before, on the side, but it's also really well tested. So you're not going to be missing these edge cases. And it's extensible. It's in both cases, they give you the keys to the kingdom and like, hey, if you don't like the way we do authentication, go change it. Also, here's all the tests that are going to either pass or fail, depending on if you've actually broken authentication on your site. But since Laravel is bundled with PHP Unit out of the box, those tests are just PHP Unit tests that get put right into the framework's test directory. I do have a hunch, and I don't know if this is true. I do have a hunch that those will switch to Pest PHP relatively soon. It seems like a lot of the Laravel framework maintainers are big fans of Pest. I don't care the way, as long as my application's under test. At some point, it's like, just as long as they get those nice green boxes or green check marks, it doesn't matter to me. But for the moment, they're PHP Unit tests.
That sounds like a version 10 breaking thing. They got to change stuff up for these major versions. Does anybody on the panel remember it the LTS for Laravel? Is it like
what number it is?
We're at now, like 7?
I believe the last LTS was 7, or might have been 6. It was 6 or 7. Yeah. The 9 right now should technically be LTS, but they haven't announced it. We're actually just having this conversation in the Kirschbaum Slack the other day. They haven't actually announced 9 as the LTS yet. And I vaguely remember seeing something on Twitter about, we're not going to have LTSs anymore because the releases should be really easy to keep up with year over year.
Okay.
I could just be hearsay. I don't know if I love that idea, but I get the sentiment. Like, it's really easy to lift Laravel from 8 to 9, 9 to 10, or hopefully 9 to 10. But I think at the moment it's 6 or 7 is technically LTS, but I think it's going not LTS very shortly.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yes. Interesting choice. Do you know if is Shift pretty popular in the community? Is that what most people use?
I think the Laravel team and the folks at Shift would say that. I love Shift as a tool. I literally just used it for a client that I'm working with to shift their Laravel 5 application to Laravel 9, and I think I had to like tweak 1 or 2 lines, and Shift handled the rest. But I don't know if I would say everybody uses it because it's a paid product. I will say right around Laravel, it might have been 6 to 7 or 7 to 8. The change guides, like the upgrade guides, went from saying, hey, this will take 4 hours, to saying, hey, this will take like 10 minutes. Like, go flip a switch here and change a variable here. So I think that's more what they're leaning into. And again, that I could be completely off base with that tweet, and they could be ready to announce LTS as 9 when they announce Laravel 10. But I feel like I heard that somewhere. But Twitter is Twitter, so it's the internet, folks. Like, it might not be true.
Eric could join us. Welcome, Eric. All right. Any other questions for Alex. Josh, did you have another question?
Oh, that was a good answer. Yeah, great talk, Alex, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. Yeah, happy to be here.
All right. Thank you for giving the talks, and thanks everyone for joining us for Merge PHP this month, and stay tuned for announcement next month. Nothing scheduled as of yet, so we might just do a informal get together hangout thing next month. But looks like we've got a talk scheduled, or we'll have a talk scheduled the month after that. So, yep. Thanks again.